We are live. We are live, and I'm coming at you with five. Welcome to another ride, y'all. Gavin Richard presents here on my channel, GBoo2786, and on Facebook, my self-entitled Facebook page. Whoever you are, wherever you are, I hope you all are feeling blessed and being safe during this pandemic and this pandemic of racism, which surpasses even coronavirus right now, because all of our minds are focused on what's going on in Minneapolis, Minnesota, as most of you guys know, and across the country for that matter, and really even around the world, because the eyes of the world are now to America in the wake of the George Floyd lynching, I should say, not murder, lynching, because that's what it was. And joining us, I'm just waiting for Mr. Williams to be in studio. I'm just waiting on him right now to hear back from him. So I'm trying to check with him right now, guys. Just hang with us for a few minutes, and we'll be starting again. So give me 1 second. Let me call. Let's see. All right, guys. So Ken is going to be joining us shortly. Of course, we're going to be talking about a host of different topics. Of course, I wanted to talk about this incident. I'm going to share this with you all, but we're going to get Ken's take on it. And you guys know there have been it's been a whole week of protests, of rioting or uprising with what's been going on, because people are frustrated. People are upset about what has happened. Before I begin to let me just put the ticker on. Please subscribe to the channel GBoo2786 on Yahoo, on YouTube, and please donate. If you see that sticker right there at the bottom, please donate to the channel at the CashApp, GavinRichardEsq, or Google Pay at gavin.grich1@gmail.com. You guys, please do so, because it takes a lot of time and effort to come out here and to sit down, set up all of the equipment. So whatever you donate, whatever you contribute, is much appreciated. You will get shout out for it. And if you have a channel, if you have anything that you want to support, you guys can feel free to email me. I do advertisements as well. And I think Ken is coming in right now. But of course, we were going to be talking about, hold on a second, let me add him to the screen. There he is. This is Brockton, 20-year veteran of the Brockton Police Department, Mr. Ken Williams, and now owner of Ken Williams Services and an expert. Ken, can you hear me?
I got you, brother. Thank you for having me. I'm sorry for being a little late.
That's all right, Ken. We appreciate you coming on to talk with us tonight, man. How's everything going on your end?
I mean, it's going well. I mean, of course, the country's feeling a little bit more at ease now. The 4 police officers who murdered Mr. Floyd have been charged. Murder 2 with the other officers as accessory to murder. I mean, that's all positive news. Of course, now we have to go down the road to getting a conviction on all 4. Murder 2.
Right, because getting an indictment is one thing. We've seen already, Ken, where officers have been indicted and charged, such as the Laquan McDonald shooting. I believe that officer is only doing less than 10 years, if I'm not mistaken. I think he got 5 years, if I'm not mistaken, for third-degree murder. I can't be sure, but it was less than 10 years. And then on top of that, you have, the Amber Geiger, who gets convicted of murder but gets sentenced 10 years. And then there's the judge comes down and give her a hug and a Bible, and then the son.
Never seen or heard of anything.
Never seen anything like that, and I doubt if she would have done that if that were a black man that was on trial for murder. And that was the issue I think most people took. And of course, you had these old head Negroes, some of whom they know who they are, that were going around supporting that. and calling out new black media. We are new black media, and new black media needs to be respected because we are the voice of the youth and young people in this country right now. And you can't point your finger at young black people and shame them into doing something anymore. I feel that you need to talk to them. But I don't want to get off subject. Sure, but that's me rambling. But I did before we talked about the four police officers, Ken. I did want to bring your attention to something, and I wanted to share with everyone. Of course, everyone knows what happened recently. I think everyone should know. I don't. If they don't know, there were two college students that were tased and assaulted by six police officers. Charges were filed in Atlanta. The mayor of Atlanta, Keisha Lance Bottoms, had served a curfew at 9 p.m. on Saturday night, which I thought was way too late to implement. And sadly, what happened is the following incident. So I wanted to share this video with everyone and get your take, Ken, off what happened. Of course, this is on ABC News. It's George Stephanopoulos there.
It's the kind of encounter sparking protests across the country. Body cam video captures Atlanta police violently confronting two college students over the weekend. Messiah Young and Tanaya Pilgrim say they were getting something to eat when they got stuck in traffic during the protest. What happened next made them fear for their lives. Moments later, one of the officers smashes the window before using a stun gun to drag them out of the car. Young suffered a fractured arm, needed 20 stitches, but the pain felt by the community quickly turned to anger.
Use of excessive force is never acceptable.
We are joined now by Messiah Young and Tanaya Pilgrim, along with their attorneys, Mallory Davis and Chris Stewart. Thank you all for joining us this morning. First of all, Messiah, I see that big cast on your arm. How are you feeling this morning?
Considering the circumstances, I'm doing okay.
So walk us through what happened.
We were kind of in a traffic jam. It was very hard to move, very hard to get down the street. It was bumper to bumpers. And I see a friend of mine on the sidewalk. So, of course, naturally, I just say, hey, what's up? I'm talking to him, making sure he's okay. This probably lasted about 10 seconds. And all of a sudden, he just tackled, just straight, separated from the car. He was literally an inch away from where I was, from the passenger seat, or from the driver's seat, I'm sorry. And he was just taken aback. They literally just threw him to the ground and tackled him. Soon, there was just so many cops swarming the car, literally just out of nowhere. And from then, it was just utter chaos. It's literally just.
And tonight, I know this has all happened so fast and it's so hard to process, but you actually felt right in that moment that you might die in that car.
Yeah, I actually thought both me and Messiah were gonna die. The way everything happened so fast, there was no telling what could happen in the next moment. Because from 10 seconds before to the time it was going on, who could have predicted any of this?
Do you have any sense of why the officers were so aggressive so quickly?
Basically, just because when they tackled him, we were there. Basically, we saw what happened. We were there. We saw everything. We were so in shock. So who knew what was gonna happen next? We had no clue.
The officers, two of the officers that we know has been fired, and three others have been put on desk duty. Mr. Davis, what more do you expect? What more do you want to have happen now in the department and with those officers?
We would like for the officer to be criminally prosecuted. Additionally, there were other officers. What was captured on film was not the end of the torment that these two young people experienced. And so there are other officers that we want the city to hold accountable, and we want them fired and prosecuted as well. And so that has to happen for there to be any sense of justice for these young people and their families.
And Mr. Stewart, will you be taking civil action as well?
Definitely. Right now, we're already starting to work on all of the proper documents and getting the lawsuit ready, but this is going to be bigger than a lawsuit. There have to be fundamental changes with policing. I mean, just look across the country.
And Messiah, what's your message now, having gone through this, to everyone watching at home, about what happened, about the police, about what kind of changes you want to see now in the country?
At this point, this just needs to cease. All of the brutality in every department throughout the country, it just needs to end.
We are sorry for what happened to you. Thank you for sharing your story with us this morning.
Thank you guys so much.
Thank you.
All right, that was the story. 6 Atlanta police officers have been charged in forceful arrest of college students, Messiah Young and Tanaya Pilgrim. Messiah Young, I believe, attends Atlanta Clark University, and Tanaya, I believe, attends Spelman. And these two officers, Mark Gardner, who was fired, and along with, I'm trying to see the other names. I don't see them here, but that is the district attorney of Fulton County, Paul Howard. So, but all 6 police officers have actually been charged, but only 2, from my understanding, got fired. So I didn't understand how that goes. I think if they get charged with criminal charges, they may be fired, at least, if that may be coming. But Ken, what are your thoughts on what you've seen?
You know, what I saw, of course, was something that shouldn't be occurring. You know, police officers swarming a car that wasn't involved in any activity that should have triggered officers to believe that they were being threatened or anything like that, or that citizens were being threatened. I saw one officer on one of the videos run up to the passenger side, take a knife blade out, stab the front tire. Other officers opening up doors to cars, to this car, to take people out of their vehicle where they were safe. They were inside a vehicle, they were safe. If you want to conduct a traffic stop, there's a normal way to do that, you know, where you walk up to the person's window, you say, "Hello, sir, I'm stopping you for XYZ reason. Could I have your license and registration?" And you slow things down and you assess, you know, from that point going forward, what you have in front of you. And then if there's nothing there, you say, "Have a nice day. Sorry for stopping you, but we're out here for XYZ reasons. And, you know, you don't, you know, represent what we're looking for. Have a nice evening. Thank you very much for your cooperation." That didn't happen here. We have 2 college students. I have 2 adult children that graduated from college, and I have 1 other child that's at home right now that, you know, I homeschool and stuff. And if I ever got a call like that, it would be holy hell to pay.
No, I can imagine.
You know, if I got a call like that and it was my wife, there would be holy hell to pay. And, you know, for these 2 college students to be traumatized by these thugs in uniform, because they're not police officers, they're thugs in uniform, exercising power over these 2 young innocent children who weren't doing anything, it's disgraceful. And for it to only have been 6 people who were reprimanded, charged, or, you know, 2 people charged, 6 people fired, when on that video we clearly see more than 6. They're all responsible, because at no time on that video do you hear any other police officer present demanding that the other officers de-escalate, or, you know, taking them by the arm and dragging them away, and they take control of the situation to de-escalate it. You didn't see any of that. So it should be more than 6. There's a serious issue there. You know, in this particular day and age, especially where the people are out there protesting an unarmed Black man being killed in Minneapolis, for the police officers to react the way they did shows that they have no freaking, they don't want to have any kind of clue as to what's going on. It's like there's an us versus them, and they're acting as if they have impunity to do whatever they want, and they don't. They don't have impunity, and that's because the people are out there marching to make sure that they understand that today.
Right, and you know the dangerous thing that happened with this is that these kids it could have turned out a little bit more different. Messiah Young could have been another George Floyd, possibly, or a Michael Brown or whoever, because I think during the incident, they were even screaming, the cops were even saying gun, gun, like he had a firearm. So they could have used deadly force, and thank God they didn't, because this would have been a whole different tragedy.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Right. And those officers, there was 5 blacks and 1 white officer. But I'll tell you this, Ken, because I've had this issue myself. I feel even more. I've been stopped by a police officer before, and who was trying to, I guess, get a rouse out of me, seek a sense out of me. I was about 19 years old when I was in New Orleans East area, and I was driving from Hammond onto Wright Road, and I saw the cop car behind me, so I made sure to slow down and follow instructions, not do anything. When I got to the stop sign, I hit my left blinker, and I waited for the cars to pass. And when it was my turn to go, he got behind me and stopped me, sure enough, and gets out the car and saying, I said, hello, officer, how can I help you? And he was like, you, first of all, you driving around like you don't know any better. You're driving all around, taking up all the space. And I'm just sitting here listening like, okay, whatever, motherfucker. I didn't say anything ugly. It's like, okay, officer. And then the next thing he says, well, your tail light is out. So now most people don't know that their tail light is out because, that's...
You're sitting in the driver's seat of the car.
I'm in the driver's seat of the car and my eyes are in the back of my head. I don't have eyes in the back of my head. Right. So thank God it didn't get any worse than that. He just gave me a warning. I said, make sure I'll fix it. But that I resonate and look back on that 15 years ago when I was a 19-year-old kid, like this shit could have actually gotten worse. It could have happened to me, but thank God it didn't.
I mean, as of today, I mean, I signed a petition that will be delivered to Congress, along with more than 20 other police officers who are chiefs, former and current police officers who are chiefs, heads of internal affairs divisions. And we're demanding that Congress take up our recommendations to transform policing. And I'm going to read some of what we're looking at as far as legislatively and as a policy that I would hope that citizens would get behind, to understand that, these are some of the things that we see, as a former law enforcement officer and as a citizen, a black citizen, a man of color. This is some of the stuff I see that we need to go and think about in terms of legislatively making changes after the protest, after the awareness campaign is done. Just like Dr. Martin Luther King, we had to have, the legislative and legal action that takes place to make sure that we are able to, have longstanding changes to systemic racism and stuff. So I'm going to read a little bit of this, okay?
Yeah, go ahead.
For Congress, we're demanding that there be more transparency. For instance, Congress should establish an independent national public database recording all officers who were terminated or resigned due to misconduct. Today, we don't have that type of access to any of that information, and we have bad cops who are, resigned from one police agency or are fired, and then they get picked up by another police agency because they're able to move around the country and stuff. So that's an issue, and we go into transparency. Another thing is number 2, accountability. Congress should establish a national standard for the use of deadly force that one upholds the sanctity of human life, which goes back to the 21st century policing recommendations when President Obama was president. That task force went out around the country, and they came up with number 1, sanctity of life was missing in law enforcement for black people. White people have sanctity of life. They're not getting jammed up like black people are. So, although we talk about sanctity of life, it's actually not sanctity of life of white people. They have officer-friendly and community policing officers and all that. Whereas in the black community, we basically have people that are acting as if they're at war against us and stuff. We go through a different set of programs. We talk about raising the threshold for the use of deadly physical force above the Graham versus Connor standard, which is the decision that set a floor, but we talk about that it's not the ceiling in our demand. We also talk about, and we go through a number of different things under that category. For state and local authorities, we cite that the cities and states should take the above actions regardless of the federal government's actions, because of course, if we think about history, in 1783, for instance, Massachusetts abolished slavery, and it was one of the first, after the American Revolution, was one of the first out of the 13 colonies to abolish slavery.
Right.
And it took the country, the U.S. government, almost 90 some odd years later, well, not 90, but whatever the math is, 1865, to abolish it throughout the country. So if we ever think about how the power is always seems to be to go and create change, it starts at the local level. So our elected officials in our state, our local, county, state elected officials, if we can get some momentum there, doesn't matter when you look at whatever it is in history, that's where the groundswell begins to go and create change at the federal level. So we're talking about at the cities and state level what actions are needed, even if the government, the federal government, doesn't take these things on immediately. For instance, the transparency. We're talking about the fact that there needs to be accountability. We're talking about the practices, prohibit the use of no-knock warrants for drug searches and other police functions where they are not essential to public safety, avoiding using military equipment and military-style uniforms for non-essential purposes. And we talk about alternatives. And then we also talk about the executive branch needs to reestablish the Department of Justice pattern or practice investigations and reinstitute the 21st Century Policing Initiative, incorporating the new lessons learned back when President Obama was president. So, we then signed this thing, and we're submitting it to be circulated in DC, and see if we can have some hearings on this and get some live testimony and bring the country into the fold, because we're serious about this. And like I said, I got majors, chiefs of police, people in charge of internal affairs, myself, detectives, homicide detectives, who all signed off on this thing, and we're sending that to DC.
Okay, that's pretty good. If you have that in a PDF format, I can take a look at it and share it with everyone. But I do have a question about that. And Squeaky G, shout out to Squeaky G. He raises a good point. There are already civil rights in place, obviously, to protect ourselves from police brutality, like 1983. So Squeaky even asks, well, and I think he meant to say, why not? He says, legislating what's already a civil right, why not just lock these cops up?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like New York City when we had Amy Cooper, who goes into a Central Park with her dog that's not on a leash. And Mr. Cooper, who's bird watching, says, Amy, why don't you put your dog on the leash? And Amy says, I'm not doing that. And now there's Amy, calling 911 to falsely report Mr. Cooper, a black man, is threatening her.
Which is a crime.
She filed a false police report. And we have on the laws in New York City, a false police report can either be a misdemeanor or a felony, right?
Right.
So why hasn't the New York Police Department charged Amy Cooper, who, when the police arrived, she gave them a bogus bullshit story about this black man, Mr. Cooper?
Because
and that goes to the point of what this person just wrote, which is, yeah, we do have laws in the books, but now we have lawmakers in New York State that are saying, well, maybe we need to add a law which says that if you dial 911 on a black person, it's a civil rights violation. That makes no sense to me. Apply the law that you have. So I'm not talking about here applying or trying to generate new laws. What I'm talking about here are, in some instances, as a use of force police practices expert, whenever you go in and you're talking about assessing law enforcement, whether it's a wrongful death or as a practice expert witness, you have to look at what they were trained to do. For instance, when we look at Minneapolis, the police officers in their policy were trained that they could use a modified chokehold, even though we all know a chokehold is a chokehold, right? You restrict anything on the neck, and that's going to lead to someone possibly dying because you're restricting blood and airflow to the brain and the heart and the organs and stuff. But yet, instilling their policies and their training, Minneapolis police since 2015 has subjected more than 200 people to this modified chokehold, and something like 40 or 50 people have been knocked unconscious from it before Mr. Floyd died from the same procedure being used by this police officer. But that police officer is going to claim that that was his training. He was trained to do that, and that was perfectly legal, and the policy protects him. That's his indemnification he's going to claim, even though the city has now fired him. That's what he's going to claim, right? So
Right.
when we look at 1983 and stuff like that, that's all on the civil side. You know, when we're talking about, you know, when we're talking about the civil rights end of it and stuff, I look at that as being more of a on the civil side. There is a criminal side to it, but most of the time charges are from, you know, your excessive force, your Fourth Amendment seizure issue, you're violating someone's right to be free, or the due process right, or an Eighth Amendment violation, cruel and unusual punishment while they're in your custody. That type of stuff is what the policies are looking at to try to actually fire somebody and maybe charge them with crimes. But technically, how many police officers, other than the past several years, have actually been charged and convicted of criminal offenses? Very few.
Very few.
So what we're trying to do in DC is make it very clear to the Congress, which is, you know, through Congress, you can force police departments to finally report what exactly is happening in America between Black people and police officers. Don't allow police officers and police agencies and municipalities to lie about the numbers, because a lot of these scientists are raising these bogus, they're coming out with bogus findings based on false information being reported to them. Let's get some real information. At the same time, for accountability, let's remove some of that indemnification that police officers have. They go out like these officers did in Atlanta, and they're completely rogue in their actions, as they are in those videos. And now we have more police officers that are carrying around those videos that you see that are capturing all this stuff. Let's make sure that the taxpayers don't have to go and pay for the settlements and pay for representing them. Let's make sure that if the police unions want to be corrupt and support those corrupt activities of those rogue officers, that the police officers have to pay for it. Maybe even at the same time, maybe we should institute professional insurance for police officers and make it so that they got to go out and they got to get their own insurance and bring a third party into this picture, so that if they want to go out, just like a medical doctor, you botch someone's knee surgery and you do that a few times, your insurance goes up, and eventually you're gonna get dropped. Maybe tether police work to being insurable. If you can't get a third party insurance coverage to bond you, then you can't be a police officer. Maybe that's what we should do in America.
Yeah, I agree. I think that honestly, not only the way I think a lot of these things are going to change if these guys just start getting locked up, you know, and then it may realize, you know, other people who have an issue with Black people, other people who, and they serve on law enforcement, it would serve as a reminder, you know, when they remember that case where, oh, those guys got convicted. And I think, you know, for choking on XZ, and I think that's been the issue with that, why we don't see too many. We see so many of these cases, although it's been going on before social media. I mean, there are instances where social media never existed, and we've heard stories about men that have been killed by police officers. We know about the involvement of police officers in race riots. That's actually where riots came from. It didn't start with Black people looting, you know, these stores. It started with whites who would start racial violence and incite racial violence against Black. And in big evidence, big example of that was the 1909 race riots, I believe, that were up in Illinois after Jack Johnson won the World Heavyweight Championship. They were upset about that. But yeah, that's a good word. Squeaky said, right, make them insure themselves. Another thing I thought of too, someone mentioned this, I think it was Willie D. When you have these settlements that are paid under the 1983 statute, where cops are found liable for, you know, injuring someone, and of course the city gives these settlements out. You know, one of the things he says that might stop that is, you know, taking money from the pension fund. If it came out, or if it came out of cops, police officers' pension, that might cause an issue with them as well and make them think twice, because then they won't have any money, and then their other co-workers and their fellow police officers would be just as pissed off at them for that because of what they did.
I mean, I don't think you can get there. I mean, I think what you can do is have it where it's a third-party insurer that's maybe they're responsible for making sure that they pay for that third-party insurer to go and cover themselves as a profession. And at the same time, I think the third-party insurer is a good idea because it brings someone from the outside in that's actually going to assess what they're doing. Kind of like your car insurance. You want to go out and commit, drive fast and get into a couple of accidents. You're going to get your rates jacked up, right? Eventually, your insurance company is going to say, you're too much of a risk for us, and we're going to let you go, And I think that's what needs to be happening in law enforcement. But at the same time, you're absolutely right. Lock them up. If someone's out there going around killing people, hurting people, maiming people, and they're doing it in such a fashion that it's unreasonable, it can't be explained, lock them up. And it makes no sense why in Minneapolis, why those officers, based on the video stuff that we're looking at, what changed? What exactly changed? The 96 hours it took them to charge the first officer, what changed? Nothing changed. The facts were the facts. The probable cause to go out and arrest still existed an hour after that event. And it existed 24 hours later after the video from the bystanders came out and was viral. So there was nothing like anything else was known, or there was more information that police officers developed that somehow gave them some sort of confusion about what to do here. And to even get to the point that it's now the 3rd of June to charge the other 3 officers, what exactly changed to add more clarity to the fact that they are all responsible for the same action? Nothing changed. So what we have here is, if you and I went out and we murdered a police officer right now, we would be charged instantly. Those officers murdered Mr. Floyd. They should have been charged immediately. And, the civil unrest is because there were murderers afoot on the loose at large in the community. And the police officers in Minneapolis went down to the house of a murderer and surrounded it as if they were guarding a murderer. And, we got to have a real serious conversation about all that. That does not happen other than police officers protecting police officers, which shows that Minneapolis has a serious problem, a rooted issue of serious corruption to me.
Yes, there have been people that have talked about Minneapolis for years. I do know there was a police shooting of a young black man, I believe in Minneapolis, that happened back in somebody that knows about it, but it happened to a young brother that they found that there was no charges being brought. And let's not forget also the now senator and possible vice presidential candidate, Amy Klobuchar, was the district attorney in Hennepin County. Is it Hennepin?
I think so.
Yeah, Hennepin County. Right. Yeah, Hennepin County that was aware of the complaints that were filed against Derrick Chauvin, and she didn't prosecute any of those cases either. So we have that problem we deal with. And another thing I wanted to bring to your attention when you mentioned the Amy Cooper situation, the deputy police chief in that case,
second in command,
Benjamin Tucker, he was the deputy commissioner. He said the NYPD had bigger fish to fry when initially asked if an investigation would go into the incident. So, but now the police chief actually corrected him on Friday and said that if there was a actual proof that a call had been made, that they would prove it, there would be an arrest. So
sounds like they decided they're going to figure it out, that they can't keep on fucking around like this, right?
No, I mean, the shit was on. It was on, unless she called 411 by mistake. The shit was there on YouTube. It was recorded.
Well, it's absurd for the second in command, a black man, to stand up and say, "Look, we got bigger fish to fry." This black man who was bird watching, doing nothing. I mean, how many black people go out and bird watch? I don't know too many of those guys. You know what I mean? This guy is out there bird watching and stuff. He's just trying to go and take on nature, and then all of a sudden he's got this lady calling 911 on him and talking to him. And she understands. She clearly understood based on her mannerisms.
Right. She changed her mannerisms before she got off the phone, and then after she exaggerated the shit, knowing what she was fucking doing. She knew any black man that was out in Central Park basically was in danger because of her bullshit.
That's right.
She signed a death warrant.
So if you and I understand that, and the rest of America understands that, why is it that the second in command figures that they have bigger fish to fry? Amy Cooper committed a crime. She did it on the video when she called 911. But hey, you know what? That's one issue. False 911 call. Okay, fine. She waited for the police to arrive to give him a whole statement that was false.
Right.
So, those police officers who arrived, took her statement. Mr. Cooper was no longer around, so he didn't witness that part of it. The two police officers are the eyewitnesses to the false statement. They don't even need Mr. Cooper.
Right. It is what it is, man. But when you have, like I say, we have a lack. He had no balls, that chief, and I think that we have a lack of leadership in the black community. We have a coon. People call it cooning, or so forth. But
I mean, I don't want to use derogatory terms that white people created against us, because they got a whole list of different names, and all they got is white trash, basically. So I don't even want to go down that road of using their words that negatively impact us based on their prism of us. I want to see us as, we are, and stuff like that. We're not perfect, but they aren't either. And at the same time, at the end of the day, the people who are unreasonable in their assessments, like the second in command in the NYPD, maybe he should think about retiring and let somebody else step up to the plate who has enough common sense to say, hey, my subordinates go out there and charge Amy Cooper with false police report. If the DA's office wants to go and bounce it, then we'll let the public take that up with the DA. But the police department understands Amy Cooper, if there's probable cause to go out and charge her with that crime, do it.
Yeah. All right. We got a few people here. Anthony Wilkes, what's up? Brandon Addison, Linda Madrill, Chuck, Kiro, what's up, Chuck, and Rod, David, that are watching. Everyone else that's watching right now, thank you for joining in. My guest again is retired Detective Ken Williams. So, getting into the police shoot to the Floyd murder, Ken, as you stated earlier, we have 4 officers that were officially charged. The 4 officers outside of Derrick Chauvin were, I have the list here. It was Kevin. Yes, they have the names here. I don't know why they've moved it around here. And Chauvin actually was a military policeman in the Army in the late 90s. That's interesting. So I see here. Yeah, Thomas Lane, Keung and Tou Thao were charged with aiding and abetting second-degree murder and second-degree manslaughter. And Derrick Chauvin's third-degree murder, second-degree manslaughter charge was upgraded to unintentional second-degree murder. Those that want to know what Minneapolis law states, I'm just reading the statute here, and I'm going to actually post it here on the chat and share it with everyone so everybody could see. This is the statute under Minnesota.
So what are the elements for second degree in Minnesota versus third degree?
I'm getting to that right now.
Oh, okay.
Unintentional murders. Whoever does either of the following is guilty of unintentional murder in the second degree and may be sentenced to imprisonment for not more than 40 years. Causes the death of a human being without intent to affect the death of any person while committing or attempting to commit a felony offense other than criminal sexual conduct in the first or second degree with force or violence or by drive-by shooting, that doesn't apply, or causes the death of a human being without intent to affect the death of any person while intentionally inflicting or attempting to inflict bodily harm upon the victim when the perpetrator is restrained under an order for protection on the victim is a person designated to proceed. Okay, so that's not that doesn't apply either, because that applies to, restraining orders and so forth.
What exactly is murder one? What are the elements for murder one in Minneapolis?
Let's see. Murder in the first degree. Whoever does any of the following is guilty of murder in the first degree and shall be sentenced to imprisonment for life. Causes the death of a human being with premeditation and with intent to affect the death of the person or of another. Causes the death of a human being while committing or attempting to commit criminal sexual conduct in the first or second degree with force or violence, either upon or affecting the person or another. So these are enumerated felonies, it looks like. The last after number one. So
basically the knowledge, you'd have to have pre-knowledge of the plan.
Right. So that's why he upgraded it to second degree.
Right. Okay. So they don't have a police. If they had a police officer that said, yeah, you know what, after this thing was committed, the cop talked about he always wanted to kill this dude or something like that, they would have some more, but they don't have the state of mind, basically.
Yeah.
They can't get inside of his mind. They only have his actions.
That's correct. So intention. So it is. So yeah. So this one just says causes the death of a human being with. This is second degree with intent to affect the death of that person or another, but without premeditation. So in other words, they're saying he didn't think about it.
He didn't plan it. Right.
Right.
I mean, you know, here goes the problem, of course, though. When you have a videotape that's almost 9 minutes, right?
Right.
And you think about the fact that they're not in the middle of the desert someplace remotely, and you know, they're in the middle of the city. They took this person out of the police car to put him on the ground, and then that's when the knee is placed on the neck. And the fact that you have eyewitnesses that are there that are walking the police through Mr. Floyd, you know, slowly losing conscious and being non-responsive to the point where he's no longer responsive, and they're pointing to him and saying that man's not talking anymore, that man's not breathing anymore, and the police still didn't act. Even when the EMTs show up, there was no urgency to really give any care to Mr. Floyd. It was like, well, you know, he's limp, we're gonna throw him on the stretcher and we're gonna put him in the back of the car and we'll work on him a little bit. So
right. I have a friend who just posted another video, and it's worse, where he's actually, I guess, loaded on the stretcher and they're not even administering aid to him at all. So he was just basically left to die.
Right. So, I mean, you know, and I know a lot of people probably don't have the experience, but, you know, being a former law enforcement officer, if someone goes limp, even if they're on the ground, your body, you sense that type of stuff. You sense it. You know what I mean? If someone I mean, Mr. Floyd didn't die without trying to, you know, get relief from the pain and the torture that he suffered from. He screamed for a while, and then slowly but surely those screams went to being mute. You gotta, you know, as a police officer, you're gonna pick up on that stuff. And at some point in time, you would think that the actions would have caused other people who were there to react to it. And that's the reason why they're all charged with murder too. They're all charged with an accessory. And one of the things that wasn't brought up in the media, one of the things that wasn't talked about, of course, is at some point in time, they all had to sit down in a room and type up a report to solidify their lies about what took place out there. Right. Which is another part of the aiding and abetting for the murder too, I suppose, that they're not really talking about.
Well, I think from what I'm reading with the aiding and abetting, they basically said, for instance, the attorneys for they're charged with aiding and abetting. I was just reading this actually. Hold on 1 second. They basically, what they looked at with Thao, with Mr. Thao, Officer Thao, was that he's up there basically being a lookout. But what I'm saying is that's all during the heat of the moment. What I'm saying is during the cooling off period, after they all went back to the police station, they all had to type up, you know, their report about what occurred. The cooling off period, none of them still came forward. So even after the heat of the moment was done, they still lied. That's that would be probably. Yeah, I think that you could also make an argument of it obstruction of justice too if they've lied on any police report.
So they should charge them with that as well.
Yeah. Yeah. So Well, I mean, and right now, I mean, the whole world is just the eyes of the world are turned towards the United States right now with all of this going on. So, and it's just devastating. And I saw part of the press conference with the little girl that was there, the 6-year-old, and her only words were, "My daddy changed the world." So um, that was touching, but you know,
You know,
I don't know what.
one of the things I noticed was, you know, there's different generations of people looking at this, and they have their own views based on their experiences and stuff. The older generation, many of them will say, "Well, I don't understand why the youth are out there trying to go and raise hell." Some other people will say, "Hey, you know, it should just be peaceful protests." Another group of people, you know, I understand that you can't go out or you shouldn't go out and destroy property, but at the same time, I suppose those people are doing what they think, even though it's illegal, their actions are illegal. Just like Mr. Floyd's, you know, death is
It
a
was
crime.
illegal. And
You
you,
know, they're doing what they think.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but it's important to point out too that it's not black people out there that's actually doing the looting and rioting. Now, I'm not saying that there aren't some that are participating, but what I've seen, and I've told you this before, have been mostly whites that have been out there, like the white guy who they say was a police officer that was knocking out windows. I've seen videos where bricks have actually been placed out there as if they can entrap people. So I think all of this shit can be a setup for different things, and it has hijacked what was supposed to be a movement. And that's why I'm very cautious when what you're about to say.
Well, no, I was about to say, well, it's important to also realize that many of these groups that espouse hatred towards minorities, black people, their intent is to have us die. And if police officers pull out guns and start killing black people in protest, then mission accomplished as far as they're concerned. I've seen a video where white guys were at a fence, rattling the fence. Not sure what state it was in, and the black people were like, "Hey, get off the fence. What are you doing?" And they're like, "Well, you know what? If they shoot you, they shoot you." They're saying that on video. So, you know, yeah, we have a lot of people who don't have our interests. You know, they don't have our interests at heart. They have their own personal interests, and it still comes down to you know, the hatred of us. And you know, we have to be aware of that. And of course, you know, some people who are very poor out there, you know, will lash out and they will steal, just like poor white people will lash out and steal things and stuff. Poor black people will do the same thing. It's an economic thing.
Right.
But you know, in terms of you know, in terms of like, you know, what's happening in the community, you know, it's very difficult to put everything back into a box. You know, once you start getting a critical mass, a movement of people who are together, and you want to start trying to control them, ultimately, police is based on people complying. If you think about it, if there are 1 million police officers in America, there's still 300 and, you know, maybe 288 million people in America. Police officers are always going to be outnumbered. The whole system is based on mutual respect, and law and order means that if I give you an order that is lawful or not, you're supposed to comply with it. That's the reason why these officers, many of them who don't even know the law, and they stop somebody and they stop someone who's knowledgeable enough to challenge them about the law, all of a sudden they fold like a cheap suit, you know, a couple questions in, but that doesn't mean that the person who's right about the law on the street corner is going to win that battle on that street corner. It still has to be adjudicated in the courtroom. So we got a lot of people who are fed up today, and they understand that we can't continue this cycle. It can't continue. And that's the reason why we're at a point right now, I believe, that we're on the verge of either, you know, everything calming down or civil war. And I'm not sure where we're at. It all depends on the next couple days.
Yeah, well, I'm just reading this, and this was interesting. This was the state versus Muhammad Noor. He was a police officer that was charged with murdering a yoga instructor a couple of years ago, and they charged him very quickly, I might add. Derrick Chauvin was actually a potential witness on this list as I'm looking at it. That's interesting.
You know, yeah, I mean, a guy with 18 citizen complaints, only 2 were founded. We don't understand what the punishment was that he received internally for those. One of the other officers had, like, I believe 16 complaints and 1 lawsuit settlement or something like that. And we have an agency that the police chief, he gets out when the family is trying to talk on CNN, and he does answer their questions and says, he's very sorry for what occurred. But then we find out the next day that the police chief has always had a policy for a modified chokehold. There's a lot of lying going on around here, and it's not just at the police agency. It's unfortunately, when it takes 96 hours to start beginning to charge people for murder, it's deeply embedded. Systemic, deeply embedded.
Yeah, yes, indeed it is. Just see anybody else got some more questions in the box that they may have for Ken tonight. I see different people. We got Everyday Peoples. What's up? He tweeted put out earlier, prosecute to the full intent. I think Everyday Peoples wants the prosecutors to prosecute to the full extent of the law. Absolutely. Squeaky G says it's hard to prove the premeditation in the Floyd case. Yeah, it is. It's always going to boil down to that. And I mean, you may have a defense attorney, depending on what defense they're going to make. The autopsy report, the initial autopsy that we've complained about, we're trying to place the blame on Mr. Floyd. And then, of course, the Michael Batten autopsy report, the family says this was homicide by asphyxiation, which everybody saw on that tape. And I noticed, I believe the autopsy, the coroner, from my father was looking at CNN. I try not to watch too much of it because it's just depressing. He said he saw the coroner actually come on and say that he made a mistake. It was correct that he was actually, this officer not only had his knee on the back of his neck, but the other officer had his knee on the back of Mr. Floyd's back as well, which was further compressing his airway. So you're dealing with those types of things, and who knows what a defense attorney, will try to fight and argue. But the maximum for this is 40 years. Does that necessarily mean they'll get 40 years? Probably not, but we'll just have to wait and see.
It's equivalent. If you're going to lynch somebody, if you're basically going to lynch somebody on the side of a road, should be the death penalty. Should be the death penalty. I don't know if the Civil Rights Department has anything that they can actually prove there on their side, but there should be a stiffer penalty for what we saw. We're talking about a man was tortured, and it was in front of citizens who will be traumatized for the rest of their lives.
Yeah.
Traumatized. A community of people traumatized. Family members. His daughter will see that video when she grows up. If she hasn't seen it now as a little girl, she'll forever see that video of her daddy calling out for his mommy before he died. That should warrant the death penalty. Something like that should warrant the death penalty. You shouldn't see a day. You shouldn't see either
I don't know
day right outside of a jail or a death penalty.
They may not. I don't know if they have it in Minnesota. I'm not sure.
I'm just saying. In terms of this country's history, when we think about the history in this country, how many people were lynched? Thousands of people were lynched, and not one prosecution. Several thousand people lynched in this country. And now we have police officers in 2020 believing that they can lynch folks. 2019, after the 1964 Civil Rights Act, still lynching people. There should be some strict law that does not afford a person the light of day again if they're going to do that type of act. That's the only way that we're going to curtail it.
Yes, indeed. Well, Ken, do you have anything more you want to offer to everyone? Or do you have anybody have any statements? Right now is the time.
I would say that, I want to make sure that it's very important that everyone understands that although these are very trying times, this isn't 1619. We're winning this fucking war. And it's important for everyone to realize that we're not going back to where we came from in this country. We have certainly, clawed our way out of a hole. We shouldn't be here. These people were trying to exterminate us, if we think about it in its reality. And we clawed our way out of that hole, and we're into this new level, and we're not where we need to be, but at the same time, we're not where we were. So we're winning this war. We have to make sure that we stay focused on that and don't allow, this trauma that is very debilitating to have you think that we're losing. We're not. We're winning.
Yeah, most definitely, we are winning. This is a marathon, not a race. So it's something that we're just gonna have to keep plugging and pushing for. And so whatever we can do, that's why this channel was created. This is why I do this, so that we can talk about stuff like this and get the information out there. Like Dick Gregory used to tell me, pray that the truth comes out, and that's what you have to do, And it's also good to strap up as well.
It's your right as a Second Amendment right. You have every right to bear arms, just like everybody else that went up there to these state capitals bearing arms and all that stuff. You have to look at what your state law allows you to do or not do. But clearly, people value protection, and a firearm is pretty important to have, I believe, as far as making sure that you legally protect yourself.
Yeah. Only thing is, the criminals don't care about the law either.
They don't.
Yeah.
And at the same time, you can't say, hey, give me a week, I got to go get some. Many times.
Yeah.
It's right then and there.
Yeah. Well, Ken, I appreciate it as always. You're welcome to come back and provide your keen insight on what was going on with this Floyd murder, that these charges have been upgraded. I'll just say in closing that what could have happened 24 hours ago, within 24 hours of Mr. Floyd's death, yet alone with even 12 hours or even 1 hour, as you pointed out, hell, even 30 minutes. It was committed in plain view in front of everybody. Those officers could have been arrested and fired immediately. And I think that this unrest that we saw did not have to happen. While I hear people always complaining, I've told you before, I had to get rid of people talking about property, people damaging property and so forth. You had Trina that got on her radio show earlier and was just so damn ignorant, talking about how, calling the protesters animals and so forth, basically displaying the same sickening white supremacist language that we've seen. And don't get me wrong, and I understood she was talking about a friend who lost her store, and that's all terrible what happened. Of course, we don't condone stuff like that. But on the flip side, however, and black men in this country are not insured either. And we are tired of seeing ourselves being killed. As Dr. King even said, the riot is the voice of the unheard, because that's the way people, who don't have power, who feel hopeless, unfortunately, and frustrated, they express themselves. And it's happened time and time again in this country. This country was founded on protest. This country was founded on riot. Now, I think that the best way and best things to do and change things is to actually withhold your dollars from some of these places that disrespect you. We have communities, other groups that set up shops in our communities. For instance, Mr. Floyd was in a grocery store, the Cup Food store, and supposedly passed around a counterfeit $20 bill. But we don't know that for a fact, and that's neither here nor there. But because of that incident, the police were called out, and we know that Mr. Floyd is no longer with us. But, as Dr. Claude Anderson says, he talks about powernomics. That's one of the ways we can do things. It can be done if we can put our own monies together and we can support each other and put a community block, take back the block, as we say. You see blight everywhere. You see blight in the neighborhood. You see an area of land that's for sale or that might be for sale. We go ahead and take that and get with a group of black investors. Those are some of the things that I encourage to do. We need more entrepreneurs, and that's something that's not even taught in our black colleges and universities. We never had that at Southern. I don't think Grambling teaches it. I don't think Howard teaches it or Xavier. But I think it's something that needs to be done. And like I said again, learn your state laws, become involved, know about the Second Amendment. So thank you guys. This has been another edition of Gavin Richard Presents on my YouTube channel, GBoo2786. Please donate to the channel. You see the ticker at the bottom. Please subscribe to the channel. Again, GBoo2786. Thank you, Mr. Williams, for joining us, guys. He's been great. Squeaky G actually said you guys were great. Your guest is very even keel. Yes, he is. Yeah. Yeah. All right. We got matching haircuts. All right, Ken. Well, you have a good night, buddy. I appreciate it.
You got it. You got it, sir. I appreciate it.
All right. Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Good night, guys. That's it.